Oh, okay. There we go. It's great to be with everybody this evening, and it's really good to be here on behalf of Humanities Tennessee and the East Tennessee Historical Society. My name is Lisa Oakley, and I am Vice President of the East Tennessee Historical Society and Curator of Education. And I'm also joined on this webinar. We're joined together with Danny Manley Hood, who is our Education Program Manager at the Historical Society. And we're just really glad to bring this webinar to you as a partnership with Teaching with Primary Sources, MTSU, and Kira Duke. We work real closely together and have for years. Humanities Tennessee has sponsored and funded our teacher professional development for many years as well. And so we're very appreciative to them. And I will, after I get off from the introduction, I will put in a link for Humanities Tennessee, as well as a link for the other two workshop events that are kind of part of this series, where we're going to be looking at with Kira and with other scholars, their new teaching the Tennessee World War II Homefront curriculum, and talking about content related to that curriculum, as well as some of the strategies and lessons, and she'll be highlighting some of that today. And so we wanted to see what we could do to get the word out about the curriculum that TPS has put together and work with her to do that. And Humanities Tennessee was very excited about sponsoring this series of events. And I will also put in a link that has more information about April the 29th, which will be an in-person workshop at Cumberland Mountain State Park. And also a tour that afternoon of the Cumberland Homesteads Tower Museum. That's going to be a lot of fun over in Crossville. We hope that you'll be able to come. And again, I'll post here in just a moment in the chat our website where you can find more information, and you will just email me to register for that. Or you can also email Kira and she can forward that information to me. We'll be doing all that by email. The other event will be on June 22nd at the East Tennessee History Center in downtown Knoxville. And we'll be talking about researching and collecting and memorializing and remembering World War II stories, global as well as local, here looking at the state's history. And we'll be having Dr. Warren Doctor, who's CEO, President of the East Tennessee Historical Society, but also a scholar of that World War II era. And also Dr. Chris Magra from the University of Tennessee History Department, and he is also the director of the Center for the Study of Tennesseans at War on UT campus. And we will be going to visit the East Tennessee Veterans Memorial, which is down on the World's Fair site. So both of those events will be coming up, and again, kind of looking at Tennessee Homefront in lots of different perspectives, different stories, and different venues. And so this is our first introduction to the topic with one of our really good friends, Dr. Nancy Schur from Chattanooga State Community College, and again with Kira. And so we're just really tickled to be with everybody this evening and to kind of kick off this series of content and strategy sessions in this format. So I think, I don't know if I know Danny was on the road, and she was going to let me know if she wanted to share anything. And so otherwise, I think that
I can just hop in.
Okay, she's going to pop in.
Yeah, hello. So sorry, I am still on the road. My name is Danny. Like she said, I'm the Education Program Manager. I know you guys are kind of tuning in from all over the state and the region, and we're really excited to be working with you guys on this, series. If you are in East Tennessee and are interested in bringing your students to the History Center, or having me or one of my volunteers come out to your classroom, we've got a ton of resources available both on the East TN History website and also on our Teach TN History website. So feel free to check us out over there for curriculum materials, field trips, anything you could really need. So we're here for you guys, and we're excited to have you join us.
And again, I'll load up the chat box with some of those links. And at the end, if you have questions and want to hang around for a minute and ask questions or ask for that information again, if you've missed something, then please feel free, because we usually hang on for a few minutes at the end of the program. So You will get a certificate of participation for today, and Kira will be gathering here in a moment. She'll kind of go over just some particulars, and she'll gather contact information so that we'll be able to get you your certificate. And I will say for the in-person events, the one in April on April 29th at Cumberland Mountain State Park, and the one on June the 22nd in downtown Knoxville, there will be a very small, but a travel stipend nonetheless, and we will provide lunch for those days. So they're kind of the typical 9 to 3, 9:30 to 3:30, depending on which time zone you're in. It's all posted, but we hope to have great workshops with everybody. And so I will post some more information. If you have questions, you can send it directly to me through the chat, or again, just at the end, if you want to stay on for a minute and ask, but I'll put my contact up and Danny's contact up as well. So I think that's it for me. And again, thank you to Humanities Tennessee for making this possible. Thank you for Kira for consistently being support for what we do, and for working so closely together with the East Tennessee Historical Society to do some great things for teachers. And I really applaud the new curriculum, which she's going to introduce, I'm sure, and Dr. Schur helped with the curriculum. So Kira, I'm going to hand it over to you and let you get us started.
All right, thanks, Lisa. So just a couple quick housekeeping things before we kind of jump into the fun stuff. So we are recording this. I know we had a lot of folks who were very interested in tonight's session who had some conflicts come up. So if you would just make sure that you keep yourselves muted unless we're doing a discussion during one of the activities, or you're responding to any discussion that Nancy might have for us. We are, we do want the session to be interactive. So feel free to use the chat box, open that up, introduce yourself, tell us where you're joining from. I also just dropped in the chat box a few minutes ago a link to a teacher contact sheet. So if you will take a moment to open that link and fill that out, that just will help us to kind of better accumulate data about who was able to join us today. And then we will be doing some other stuff at the end, some survey stuff and information about how to get PD credit. So we'll cover that at the very end of today's session. As Lisa mentioned, we are going to be, I'm going to be using some material from our World War II Homefront in Tennessee curriculum. And that is a project that we started, we did last year as far as the creation of it, and have really been rolling it out in recent months. And we're very lucky to have a crew of people from across the state who helped as advisors on that project. And Dr. Nancy Schur was one of those people there at Chattanooga State Community College. And so we're really excited to have her be able to join us today as kind of our featured speaker for tonight's session. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to her. And then she's going to post the link for the curriculum there, and we'll talk more about it here briefly. So Nancy, you're muted.
Sorry. It's been a hot minute since I've been on a webinar. All right, so I was trying to share my screen. You see anything? How about now? Oh, wait. How about now? Okay. Sorry about that, y'all. Well, good evening. Thank you for attending this after probably what you had was a full day of school and other obligations. I'm so thankful for the partnership with myself, with Kira and Lisa and Humanities Tennessee. This is just a wonderful opportunity to get to know more people and just to talk about history. It's great. So I'm trying to advance. There we go. I wanted us to look at the first thing we're going to encounter tonight is the iconic picture of Rosie the Riveter. And on the left portion of the screen, you see the original Rosie the Riveter. And in the right-hand portion of it, you have the US sort of stereotype of the Rosie the Riveter. I'm sorry, I'm tripping over my words. Just I'm a little flustered because I couldn't get that screen on and I felt dumb. Anyway, so looking at the left-hand side, the original Rosie the Riveter, what do you see in this image? You can unmute, you can post in the chat. I can't see the chat though, so somebody help me. Thank you, Kira. What do you see in this image? The very basic question.
We see a woman with a rivet gun.
Okay, good. What else?
She's very muscular.
Yes, that is really one of the interesting things I think about the original Rosie. Norman Rockwell was the artist for this. I should have said that at the beginning. What else do you see?
Someone notices that she's eating, and then also that she's kind of a beefy woman.
Yes, she is eating and she is, you know, a little fluffy, like many of us today, including me. She's just a little fluffy. And like what sort of vibe do you get from this version, the Norman Rockwell version of Rosie the Riveter? What do you think that Mr. Rockwell is trying to portray in this image of Rosie the Riveter?
Well, one thing I noticed is her expression. She seems a little like sassy, just the way she's kind of got her head turned and like the expression on her face. And
yeah, absolutely.
So some others comments, you know, it's almost just like it's another day on the job for her. Someone else mentions that she doesn't need anyone's help. She's good, you know, she's good there by herself.
Yep. Yeah, I love the fact that, you know, I've done this little oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. I've done this little exercise in class in several classes, and most every time, you know, people start with, okay, she has a big tool, you know, right? She has big muscles. Then they get the sort of aspect of her attitude, right? And that is really sort of interesting because could we like compare the original Rosie and what we talked about the attributes of this image? How would we describe or you know, maybe add to what is the Rosie, the sort of war production Rosie? What does she exude? What do you see in that particular image?
So it's mentioned that, you know, she's addressing the audience.
Okay. She also has muscle. Well, at least she's touting her muscles.
She's got her makeup on.
She got her makeup on. Yes.
Define those eyebrows.
Right.
So it's mentioned there, you know, that the one on the right looks like she has a manicure. She doesn't have overalls. She's a paler complexion.
Yes, yes, yes. All of these are good responses. We're comparing and contrasting essentially, right? The two images. And there are very interesting and you know, seeable differences in the two Rosies. Why do you think, I mean, you know, he was a great maker, he was a great painter, right? Why did the United States government not put his image as the Rosie image? Why do you think the government changed it? Why not just use the Rockwell one?
So I wonder, I mean, for myself, looking at it, the one on the right is much more of what we think of as the mainstream standardized version of one, what, the feminine ideal, it's kind of been produced, projected to be. And then definitely the difference in the attitude that each is presenting.
Yes. I think that's very interesting. And so when you hear the term Rosie the Riveter, right, I think most Americans, the vast majority of Americans, sort of defaults to the US version, right? The United States Army's, not the Army, but the War Production Board, right? That we default to that particular image. And maybe if you are like me, you sometimes don't really understand that all of the Rosies were not white women. And so the first little portion of what I want to talk about tonight with all of y'all is how the Rosies contributed to the war, which I think, many people sort of understand that, including probably middle school and high school students. But we don't get a lot of information about the African-American Rosies, or what historians have termed the Black Rosies. And one of the most important wartime plants for aircrafts was located in Nashville at the Vultee aircraft plant. And I just put a few little facts about this particular aircraft plant. It was opened on May 4th, 1941. And during that same time period, the governor was Prentice Cooper. And basically this aircraft plant, and there were other aircraft plants around Tennessee, some in Memphis, etc. But this aircraft plant built primarily the P-38s and the Vengeance dive bombers that Vultee made in their factory. And what you see here in the picture, right? I'm not sure that if we would have just looked at this picture before anything else happened, I don't know if we would have thought about Rosie the Riveter maybe in this context. I wonder too, if we would ever think about, unless we are, versed in World War II history and in the content of Black Rosies. I don't know about you, but I tend to see, when I hear Rosie the Riveter, I really don't understand that there are African-American women who are 60% of the workforce in Tennessee with these airplane plants, 60% were African-American women in the factories. And we know a little bit of why these Black Rosies are moving out of the rural South in the pre-World War II Great Migration, the second of the Great Migrations. We'll see people from southern cities moving to industrial cities of the North and west. And that's usually called the Great Migration. About 200,000 families are going to take that journey from the south to the north. And they are doing so because they have a belief that in the northern states, Jim Crow laws and other racial parts of the Jim Crow laws would not be as overbearing as what it would be in the southern states. But no matter if they're going from wherever they're going to, the majority of the employers, particularly in Tennessee, didn't necessarily want to employ African American women. I read a book, an article about this lately, and it was titled "First Hired" or "Last Fired, First Hired." No, wait, that made that the other way. Sorry, it was "First Fired." You get the idea, right? Sorry. And this, if you look at the picture of what this woman is doing, right? She is the epitome of a working Rosie the Riveter, right? She's doing the job and she's gaining experience. She is probably somebody, I guess the norm of these Black Rosies, as historians call them, the norm is that they were probably domestic servants. Maybe they worked in a restaurant. Maybe they worked in a laundry. And they, during World War II, when there were so much employment opportunities available because many American men were going overseas to fight the war, that these women empowered themselves to take risks and to ask for the jobs and to perform well in those jobs because the pay that they are making is much better than the work that they were doing before the war began. And so in spite of the idea that most employers refuse to hire African-American women, we know that the president ordered Executive Order 8802, which banned the racial discrimination in the defense industry. And that was a really big change because that meant that the Black Rosies and the white Rosies had the same pay and the same hours and etc. And I think if we think about how this plays out in the history of World War II, think about things like the Double V campaign. If you know about the Double V campaign, that was African-American soldiers who are deployed to the battlefields of World War II. They launched this Double V, Double Victory campaign because one, they want to have a victory over fascism in the world. But two, they want a victory over racism at home. And so I think in their own little ways, we can portray these Black Rosies as fighting their own Double V campaign. And I think that's just really interesting that, you know, yeah. I'm very passionate about this topic because, you know, I think it's important for us as teachers of history to show not just, you know, to show people that don't usually get the credit that they deserve. Any questions or ideas? Do you cover Rosie the Riveter in your curriculum? And if so, would you engage your students with a photograph like this, or what are some of your ideas?
One thing that kind of made me think about, there's an Amazon Prime series. They redid A League of Their Own a year or so ago, and there's a piece in it where they're telling the story of an African American woman who's trying to get hired at one of the local factories, and it's really one of the first like depictions of this story of a Black Rosie that I've seen in any kind of pop culture piece before. And it's really interesting kind of way to again kind of bring that story forward, because again, we so often in pop culture just see one of the other two images that you started us with. And so I think looking for where we can find those stories represented elsewhere is a good way to kind of introduce that to students and to a broader audience.
Yes, absolutely. Agreed.
Wonder if there are any oral histories, out there that would be something interesting to look into. If, I bet if there aren't, I bet that there will be some, hopefully, because I know this generation is, I'm sure, passing away, but hopefully there'll be some that have been captured, or children, of folks that were involved to tell those stories, because it always helps to have a picture, but also to have a name and to have a little bit of a story, in their own words, kind of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I don't know about stories about Black Rosies, but I know in some research I was doing for a different topic, I found this collection of oral histories that had been done, and it was one of the universities in Texas, and I don't remember which one. But they had posted them all. It was a part of one of the journalism schools that did it, but they were all Latin American, Latino stories of, from that time period. And so you had all these like different stories of, that community, how they experienced World War II living in different areas of the United States, especially, those in the Southwest.
Any other thoughts or questions? I wonder if that was maybe, Kira, the Texas Women's University. They have a big WASP archive there. Maybe that, I don't know.
I'm gonna dig in some of my files real quick and see if I can find the link, and I'll post it in the chat real quick if I can find
Okay,
it.
cool. Yeah, because there were also, sorry, I've been talking over you. There were also a handful of African Americans who were WASP pilots. So that's pretty cool too.
I just did a quick Google, and I think it was the University of Texas. They have Latinas and Latinos in World War II journal entries that look really interesting.
Awesome. Okay, well, I guess my time is up for this point, or for this particular section. I'll get it back to you, Kira.
Danny, I think you're right, and I did find, I'll post it in here in a little bit in a moment. But for now, we're going to switch gears just a tiny bit. So in our World War II curriculum, we have, here, I'm going to pull up our website here real quick. So if you go to our website, which is www.mtsu.edu/TPS, you will find that we have a new page there, the World War II Homefront in Tennessee. So we added this page where you can find the curriculum guide that we created, and we also are adding to this as we go along some supplementary materials. So if you're interested in wanting to get a link to the full PDF of the curriculum, So that's all 4 of the units together. You can use that link that's right there. Or if you want to look at kind of individual units, which there are 4 of them, you can just click on one of these. So the story of the Rosie the Riveters is part of our Tennesseans at Home unit. So if you're interested in looking for some stories, some resources around the Rosie the Riveter piece and how that played out in Tennessee, that unit is the one that you'll want to look at. And in fact, let's see here, let me download that real quick. And let's see, make sure that it's showing the right thing here. Okay, so that is this one right here, and you can see this unit itself is 35 pages. Now, the way all of these are structured is that they all have a historical overview towards the beginning. This was kind of written, kind of trying to pull together, a supplementary history about the Tennessee story. And so this is a good way to get kind of a good overview to really kind of complement what's in your textbook. And so you'll have that. And then you'll note that there are, again, activities. And we created this so that, we understand limitations in classroom time. So we didn't want to do full lesson plans because we understand that you don't have days on end to talk just about the Tennessee World War II story. So we want to create these little activities that can be used as supplementary pieces that you can kind of work into what you're already doing. And so that's what you'll find with these. And then we also wanted to give you places to go to find additional resources because there's so many wonderful, archives and videos and things out there that different organizations have done. So we wanted to kind of pull all that together. And so you'll find those listed, and we tried to group them together by topic. So, like civilian contributions during World War II here. Oak Ridge, women in war. So again, here's those those Rosie the Riveter stories. So we're going to look at some of our Victory Garden stuff here in just a moment, but I want to, before we get to that, I want to show you, this is the Rosie the Riveter activity that we have here in this particular section. And so it uses a lot of the Library of Congress images from the Vultee Nashville plant. And there are some great ones, and a lot of those are in color, which I love the color images. You can do so much with them, and they're just beautiful. So you'll see that those have been pulled out here, that you can do a photo analysis with them. And then this activity has students, challenges them to create their own job advertisement. Because again, so much about that Rosie the Riveter story was trying to entice women to become into the workforce. And so that is kind of how that one is created. But for our activity here on this section, I want to focus on Victory Gardens because it's another really interesting story that you can bring in to talk about how the war impacted those who didn't serve in the military, but we're here on the home front, we're just civilians, but World War II really impacted everyone's lives, and the Victory Gardens are a great way to kind of get into that story. So with this, you really want to start with your students talking about what were Victory Gardens, why did we need them, it's just kind of a foundational place. And here's this great image from the National Park Service that's done in Oak Ridge, where you can see again one of the homes there, the workers with this garden there that he's tilling, with a little kid playing there on his tricycle, and the mountains there in the background. It's just a beautiful image. So again, why did we need Victory Gardens? What were their purpose? And that's a great question to kind of pose to students to begin with and see what they, what their baseline is. What do they think was the purpose of that? And then one of the activities that we have, we actually use this art or this page out of an advertisement out of a newspaper. Now you'll note that this one, it wasn't published in Tennessee. It's published in Michigan. But again, these were the type of advertisements that were getting published in lots of different places around the country. And so this one is a really great one, though, to get into again, why did we need them? What was the purpose? And I know there's lots of little text on here, and you can find the full transcript for this on page 42 of the Tennesseans at Home unit of the curriculum. So if you want to open that up here in a minute so that you'll be able to read that, that will be very useful for you. But before we get into the small text, I want you guys to take just a minute to look at kind of the bigger pieces of this. And what are some things that stand out to you that you notice here on this image? You want to kind of drop that in the chat box or feel free to unmute yourself.
Kira, can you see the chat?
Yeah, I was trying to open it.
Okay. Just making sure.
Yeah, Suzanne brings up the great point about, being able to relate this to how, people did gardens during, during the COVID shutdowns. And that's a great way to kind of draw some more modern comparisons, maybe something your students can relate to. But yeah, looking at this image, what are some things that kind of jump out at you? Gardening is fighting. Yes. So it's interesting, and take your battle stations. I love that, because to me, again, it is this call to arms, right? But it's not a call to go grab a gun. It's a call to go grab a shovel, because he's holding out a shovel, Uncle Sam there. So that is a great, yeah, and it is sort of an Uncle Sam appearance as a farmer, holding the flag in one hand and his shovel in the other.
The kids will not have any experience with the idea of rationing. And it's mentioning in here, rationing in the advert, and the kids will need some introduction to what was going on there with the idea of rationing and why they could enhance their diet.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Thanks for letting me on, by the way. My class ended early.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, Suzanne mentions kind of the rhyming phrase. It's a little catchy. I love this piece right here where it says, grow more in 44, the farmer can't do it alone. So again, it's this call to action. And then also I would want to, draw students' attention to this piece down here in the very corner. Who is this sponsored by? It is the War Activist Advertising Fund. So again, tying this into very much being part of war efforts. So if you want to kind of, again, open up the link and kind of read through some of the text, we're going to think about, again, what are some things that really jump out to us that are here, that are mentioned here in the article and in the advertisement itself. So again, you can find that on page 42 of the Tennesseans at Home. And Lisa, if one of you guys could drop the link in there, because I can't get back to it at the moment. Yeah, it does, bring up this idea of ownership, right? Like, you have a role, like, you have personal responsibility and being able to, like, again, it's call for the individual to be able to do something. I personally, there's a line it's in this section right here, actually it ends right here, where it talks about let's go, and it says, a few tired muscles this year are the standout marks of a good citizen. So again, that this idea of collective citizenship, like, what does that mean to be a responsible citizen during this time?
And the government is supporting a little bit the idea of this, because they are providing encouragement to and advertising that will also help them if they're having issues, see what's tried and true, getting their equipment at some sort of discount or supply that's available to anybody that wants to do this.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting to point to Brand. Someone else mentioned that was kind of surprising to them, that it is, it's a sponsor, that, there's things that are on the market, there's assistance that's out there, like that this is, being supported by government resources. Yeah, and this, again, the sacrifice is part of the collective. I also thought that it was really interesting that it starts out talking about how much food is necessary to feed someone per day, and how that has increased for those who are actually in the armed forces. And so that might be something to talk about students, like why would someone who's in the armed forces need to have more food available to them on a daily basis than a regular civilian? And then another thing that you might want to, that I found interesting is, it ends here, this call to help, and it talks about that the farm population is at a 20-year low. And again, why might that be? Why would the farm population at this time be ebbing? And so this is a great chance to again kind of connect things back to the unit that you would have just taught, thinking about the Great Depression, New Deal, and how that would impact the number of farmers and those kind of things. Yeah, he was mentioning in the physical toll of being a soldier, and having to haul all that equipment, and it's gonna need a little bit more food to fuel your daily activities. Yeah, and this call that even if you had a good farm, a good victory garden last year, you can do even better this year. Like, there's no, like, you got to raise the bar. We got to do better, even for those who have been doing their part last year. So again, this is just such a great piece that you can do a lot with, because the visuals there, and again the text. I think there's just a lot of great conversation that can be had with this piece. So after you've kind of got into again why the victory gardens are important, then how are gardeners recruited, beyond just kind of these general things? Like, how else do we reach out and try to recruit people and teach them? And so some other ways that might have been done was, of course, through posters. And so we have this one right here that's from the Tennessee State Library and Archives, that you could use with students. And we're going to look at this one and kind of talk about it in a few minutes. But another source that we use in one of the activities is this video right here. And I may have to actually stop sharing and restart so we get the audio clear. So let me do that real quick. So I want to make sure you guys can hear this. So this is an oral history interview that was done with Margaret Sanders. It was done in 1993, so I can remember it's like 50 years or so after the war, talking about her experience being involved with victory gardens. So we're going to listen to this, and I want you to again think about how we're recruiting people in the role here.
What I was getting at was that did you know anyone who planted a victory garden?
Oh, did I ever? The victory gardens were, I did two things. As I told you, my husband said I was a joiner, but gardening was really my forte. I had a home, and I always had lots of flowers. And while I was while I was doing my gardening was when we had the victory gardens. And at that time, I was on the National Council of Garden Clubs board. We started victory gardens, and having lived in Nashville all my life, I had many friends on the Board of Education. So I received permission from them to use the kitchens in the public schools. And I got people from the state agricultural department to come there and take over those kitchens. And then women who belonged to garden clubs in Nashville went to those schools, and they were taught how to preserve vegetables. They were taught to do canning.
Good.
They were taught how to put up tomatoes and corn and all those things to preserve for the winter, like the little squirrel in the nut.
There were many shortages during that period of time.
Many shortages, and I couldn't tell you how many people took advantage of going to those schools and learning how to preserve their food.
What a service.
It was. And it was such a thrill. And even now people go, we had, well, I've forgotten it, didn't we have about 22 million victory gardens over the country at that time?
Miss Sanders, I don't know that,
I
but
think I'm correct about
lots of
that.
people had victory gardens.
They did, and these here in Nashville, these people did a lot of work with it. And we all go back to it now. Of course, we have new techniques now. We used to put corn up, now we take corn, Brother E, and just put it in the freezer and the scallop at it until we're ready for it.
So I love this video clip because again, her talking about the schools and how they were teaching people and how all the resources that they were created to again recruit people to show them how to do this and how to be effective. So what were some things that kind of stood out to you guys in that clip? Yeah, she was definitely putting her talent to use, using connections in the community. Yeah, and just a number of people who took them up on learning how to go about canning and use this opportunity. So in listening to her, how do you what is her tone in this? I mean, how do you think she looks back and when she thinks about this time period? How does she view the Victory Gardens? Yeah, she's really proud. And again, I think that the sense of community, right? It was definitely a positive, and bringing people together. Yeah, and listening to this, it does make you a little regretful that we don't, kind of emphasize this now and don't teach people to kind of do this before, do how to do some of these skills. And it definitely shows the leadership of women in the community during the time period. So those are all fabulous points. Again, showing, again, why these, the role of how we recruited people and how it worked, and again the supports that were there. It wasn't just everyone knew how to be a gardener and have a successful garden, that there was a lot of supports and teaching that went into actually making sure that this was a successful effort to support the war effort.
What I was getting.
Oops. All right, so going back to that poster that we looked at, because in our activity we actually pair this poster with the interview there. And so, you could look at this and think about, in this, we recruit people and how we're trying to recruit them. When we look at this, who is this targeting, do you think? Families? Yeah, so thinking about just kind of targeting families. And Suzanne, of course, mentions that the great seam of the lady's leg there, the hose back then that had the seams in them. So what else do we notice about how they're dressed here? Yeah, and the fact that it's multi-age, so we have young people, we have older people, like they're, everyone can have a role and be helpful here. They do have on farm clothes here. We got the guy in his overalls and his hat. We other than her stockings, we can't tell a ton about the woman other than she's in the skirt and kind of top there. And the little boy looks like he also probably has on overalls. So what about the two slogans here? Our food is fighting, and a garden will make your rations go further. So what do we think about why these two slogans were used? And as Joanne said, you'd probably need to explain to students a little bit about, what rations were and how that worked during World War II, so that they have a better kind of context for understanding that one.
Actually, my daughter is involved in Wales, and my grandson in England, with neighborhood allotments where they do this still. because of the rising prices and situations with farmers not getting their money's worth when they are selling their produce and having issues with almost strikes and stuff going on. So they still do this in Great Britain and foster it, and they've been doing it even during COVID.
Yeah,
Were they-
I think that's a good kind of modern comparison to bring up. And yeah, like Elizabeth mentions there, you know, I think students, you could probably draw some comparison to some things that students might remember from, especially, you know, the first year or so during, you know, COVID, how, you know, there's definitely some comparisons to like restrictions on toilet paper and, you know, Lysol and, you know, those kind of things. It's, you know, a little different than how it happened in World War II, but it's a great way to
Yeah.
kind of introduce the idea, right?
But this was done in Britain then, and they haven't quit. They're still doing it in the neighborhood allotments that they have. And even churches sometimes use their unused cemetery plots in the neighborhoods are dug up for the neighbor people to come in and do this. It's an ongoing thing there in Britain because they are so isolated as an island country.
Another way to kind of introduce this, you know, if you had students who are in more urban areas, there are some neighborhoods that do community gardens, especially as a way to address issues of food deserts. And so that's another way to kind of draw a kind of a more modern day comparison to the idea of victory gardens.
The University of Tennessee 4-H will train people who want to learn how, still to this day, people who want to learn how to preserve food that they are growing in their areas. So it's still out there, the idea of educating people that need to know how to conserve and spend less on their groceries.
So with you know, all of the sources that we've looked at in our curriculum guide, you'll see that there are different analysis sheets that you can use with your students to kind of use them as prompts. And then, you know, you might, you know, want to end with the question with your students, you know, what can victory gardens tell us about life as a civilian on the home front during World War II? You know, again, thinking about how during this time period, you know, it was a call to collective action, and it was that everyone was impacted, whether it was, you know, with, you know, people being asked to help to grow their own food, to, you know, help support the war effort, or if we even go back to the idea of the Black Rosies, like, you know, that people were being asked to, you know, women were being asked to step into roles that they previously had not been asked to do in such large numbers. So I think that, again, you know, thinking about how we introduce the idea of home front and how civilian and just regular everyday life was impacted, these are two good ways to do that. The other activity that we have in the curriculum guide for this section gets into some sources available from the Girl Scouts of Middle Tennessee. And so again, as a way to think about how students and young people were impacted. And so you can look at those in that activity as a way to, again, help students see how even people their age were involved with the war effort. And so it's a great way, again, to get into this idea of home front and look at it from that angle, as opposed to just looking at it from the political and military side. But again, how it impacted really just everyday life. All right, so with that, I'm going to turn things back over to Nancy. So let me stop sharing here. And Nancy's going to talk to us about, I think, Battle of Athens next. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. You're muted, Nancy.
I do not learn from my mistakes ever. Sorry. Before I turn this to the next slide, I want to hear or see, do any of you know anything about the Battle of Athens. It happened on August 1st, 1946. Anybody have any pre-knowledge?
If you guys want to use the raise hand feature, if you have knowledge, you can use that from our reaction buttons. So we have one person who's making a guess that, maybe it was a bonus army situation.
Oh, okay, good. It definitely is dealing with returning veterans. So that is definitely on the right track. Any other thoughts? Guesses are totally legit.
Connects with authority, connects with abuse of authority, connects with abuse of, or was it the Nashville Police Department? I'm trying to remember the exact department, but yeah, veterans being treated badly, veterans being treated poorly.
You're on the right track. It's McMinn County.
That's right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very connects a lot to today. I mean, that's something that you're talking about connecting to students. I was talking to Dr. Graham, and we just finished the one in the 70s. And that's why I thought there was time in between. I'm sorry. I thought there was an hour and we'd start at 6 to 8. No problem. But yeah, always connecting that to how is it relevant to kids today. And well, that's why I was excited about being a part of this tonight too. Yep.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for that. Any other thoughts or comments about your knowledge about, or not knowledge about, the Battle of Athens?
Someone else, guesses vets demanding pay.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Veterans demanding pay. Another guess that we had.
Okay. We are getting closer and closer every time somebody guesses. Excellent. Well, I don't want to leave you on the seat of your pants. So here, let's think about. Okay, can you see the Battle of Athens slide? Okay, thank you. So this is more words that I usually write on one slide. Typically, I like to be quick with the words and give you more pictures and things to look at and etc. But honestly, I did not know this story before I was asked to prepare for this particular topic. I think it's a really interesting topic, and like Patrick said in his comments just previously, there are so many applications that are kind of resonating in today's political climate that were resonating in the aftermath of World War II, when returning veterans are coming home. And there were over 3,000 men in in McMinn County. There were over 3,000 men who fought in the World War II. And so that was about 10% of their population. That's a pretty big percentage of people to go off and fight a war and then are being integrated back in to the community and such. But have you ever heard of a really interesting character in Tennessee history? His name was Boss Crump. Yeah, I see a couple. I see a couple yeses. Political machines, you know what political machines are, right? They usually have some high-ranking figure in the politics of whatever region or city that you're in. Boss Crump was in Memphis. He was the boss, the political boss. And what he said went, what he said went. And he was a man not to be trifled with. And there's some controversy in the research about this particular battle in Athens. I had a couple of sources say that Boss Crump was not sort of in allegiance with or in cahoots with the corrupt sheriff whose name was Paul Cantrell. I had another couple of sources that said they were not in cahoots, that it was just a sort of lesser organization than what Boss Crump was doing. But anyways, if you're a political machine person, then you're trying to influence those people that you are protecting and that you are doing favors with, that you are asking them to, and then in return for what you can do for those people, whether it's get them a new lease on a house or whatever it is, then those people who are benefiting from that political position are asked to vote in his Paul Cantrell's way. That's maybe a quick primer of what a political machine or a political, in this case, was doing. And the sheriff, Paul Cantrell, it's kind of a convoluted story. The background is, I don't want to bore you to tears, but the gist of it is that first, Sheriff Cantrell tried to there was a law on the books that said if there were any people who were out at night or out on the roads, in buses or whatever, people coming just into the county and going out of the county, he would stop all the buses. Let me just tell you straight. He would stop all the buses moving through his county. He would take the people into jail, book them for intoxication, whether they were intoxicated or not. And he gets fees from each of those bookings. When he writes a fee, when he puts somebody in jail, and when he gets somebody out of jail, the police department gets a fee for that according to the municipal laws of that county. So he starts there. He starts kind of small time, I don't know, bully. But then he sort of turns into a more ruthless, corrupt sheriff. And he would begin to go to the local roadhouses in McMinn County, the juke joints and all, and those places. And he would ask the owners of those establishments for kickbacks so that he and his sheriff's department, his deputies, would sort of turn a blind eye to the fact that, there's illicit alcohol going on in these speakeasy, in these roadhouses. There are, they turn a blind eye to prostitution and etc. And they skim money off in bribes from that illegal activity in the county. And as World War II comes to a close, we know that many of those veterans who have fought on the battlefields of World War II, they're returning back to their hometown of Athens or to their county of McMinn. And when these veterans arrive, they've been through hell, right? They have been, have seen things that probably none of us can imagine. And when they come back and they realize that the sheriff is controlling some illegal activities, they're kind of mad about that. they don't want to come back to a town where they're going to have to be fearful of their lives. Or, you know, because the Cantrell and his cronies would beat people up, and, you know, do lots of illegal things. And I guess probably, at least for the veterans side of the thing, when Cantrell asked for the redistricting of the voting sections in McMinn County, they did so, they gerrymandered so that there was never a chance that a Republican vote would be the majority vote. They redlined and redistricted, and they in a sort of tactic that we've seen recently in parts of the United States, is combining precincts so that a minority and a majority are in the same precinct, but the majority will always have the numbers. And so that redistricting killed the Republican opposition. I should have said that Sheriff Cantrell was a Democrat. Excuse me. And so when veterans return, obviously they're going to be upset, and they're going to use their power of the vote, their right to the vote, to make things all on the up and up in Athens and in McMinn County. And so what they do is they sort of gather all together, and they pick out people who want to run for public office. And their number one target, their number one hope was that the sheriff could be reelected, right? He would be thrown out of jail, thrown out of office, and somebody from the veterans community could replace that crooked sheriff. However, it gets a little sticky here, because the corrupt sheriff is actually running not for sheriff, but he's running for Congress, for the Tennessee state legislature. But anyway, to make this a more story that's not too difficult to understand, Cantrell puts in one of his cronies as sheriff while he's campaigning for the Tennessee office. Mansfield, his name is Pat Mansfield. He's also corrupt. And so when the time comes, then what we see on October 1st, the lead up to the election, which is going to be on August 1st, 1946. There's a veterans group in Blount County who have somehow realized that the veterans group in McMinn County might need help at the polls. And so the veterans in Blount County volunteer themselves to be poll watchers at all the polls in McMinn County during that 1946 voting day, which was again August 1st, 1946. And so the veteran group in McMinn County says, yes, that would be great. Thank you. Come on in. And when the sheriff, Pat Mansfield, when he realizes that there are going to be poll watchers from the veterans side, he will hire 350 sheriff deputies as his own poll observers. Now, is any of this connecting to anything that we've witnessed in this country in the last 10 years. This is, yeah, as Patrick said, it's coming around again. Yes. The veterans agree to the offer by Blount County veterans to watch the polls, and then things go really, really sideways from here. Now, I know I'm not trying to like put you in suspense for a whole long time, but what do you think might be playing out here that's going to happen on election day? Any ideas?
So violence
Yeah,
or conflict.
it's violent conflict. Absolutely. And I really tried to just sort of tell the rest of this story in two pictures. Okay, I've been doing a lot of classes here at Chattanooga State. And I'm sorry, I'm in an office that's really not mine because my office is being renovated, but sorry, sidetrack. It looks like I'm a hobo in a train station, but this is my office. Here are the two pictures. This ain't good. This ain't good. So actually the image that's on it's my right-hand side. So not the overturned car, but the other one. That is the first image in the two sequence. So what does it look like is happening in the right-hand side picture here? And I know you don't have a lot of context, but try and, brainstorm, think about what we might be seeing here.
So everyone is watching something. It definitely looks like a lot of people have gathered, here at this building where obviously something is about to happen. So it's voting or, the election results maybe.
Good.
Or counting of the votes.
Counting of the votes. Okay. Any other thoughts?
Again, I always try to put my mind into how my students would think
Yes.
as an adult as well. And I'm seeing the image of the man on the fence or on the, climbing, and relate that back to the January 6th insurrection. So I might consider anger, frustration, impatience. Again, there's that separation between the people, so they could be being courteous or they could be on the verge of something else. But then also I think the context is the photo to the left. So obviously there's some kind of turmoil that's to come, depending on how that would be addressed to the kids and arranged and placed. But yeah, it looks like there's a lot of tension.
Yeah, in fact, the right-hand side picture is one of the precincts, one of the voting precincts. And it's the main voting precinct. And so most of the voters, because I think there's only 5 in the entire county, and it was like 26 or some number of precincts. It was outrageous. But this is probably the main polling place. And when the sheriff realized that, there was poll watchers that had come into the main precinct from Blount County, they weren't armed. But then the sheriffs who were brought in by the sheriff, the deputy sheriff, sorry, that were brought in by the sheriff were armed. And so that precipitated first a demonstration outside of the polling place. And then the veterans from Blount County and then the veterans from McMinn County, they kind of formed a group and said, hey, this is not right. you know, this is un-American. This is not supposed to happen in our country. I mean, weren't we just fighting for rights like the right to vote? And so they decided to infiltrate the armory and get guns and ammunition and arm themselves. And there was a melee. You can see that there's overturned cars. There's a lot of people out on the left-hand side. There are not a ton of pictures that I was at least able to access that shows, you know, sort of more than these couple of shots of photographs, sorry. And it's amazing. It's, some historians say that it was, you know, like a hour firefight. Other historians claim, or bystanders claim, that it was 2 to 3 hours of the OK Corral kind of thing. I'm a little dubious about that being a protracted violent shooting occurrence, because no one was killed. I mean, thank God that nobody was killed. But if you're, you know, unless they're terribly conditioned guns, or if they're incompetent, you know, whatever I'm trying to say. It seems though like this is something that you could very easily, you know, sort of incorporate into your classes if you're trying to sort of connect, you know, today's political environment to this environment at the end, at the tail end of World War II.
I have a question.
Please.
Yes, ma'am. What I would question is the sheriff's deputies that were hired, were they veterans as well? And since they were sheriff's deputies, I would imagine they would have been able-bodied men that would have returned from the war and been veterans themselves. So they would have been fighting their fellow veterans. I don't know. I just have that's always been something. When you were saying this, I kept thinking they were sheriff's deputies, so they had to have been young and they were armed. So I knew they knew how to use firearms. I don't know if that question's ever come up, but that was my thoughts on it.
No, I think that is a perfect insight. It's really an interesting insight. From what I can gather from the evidence, the sheriff he used sheriffs and deputy sheriffs. I know I kept saying deputy sheriffs, but there's also sheriffs in there, like not even just in the county. He is as far away as Illinois. He's recruited like 350 of these men to come protect the polls on voting day. And that's an excellent question. And he's paying them all. He's paying them all to do this.
And I think, you know, when I started at the Historical Society many years ago, we worked a lot with the Mittman County Living Heritage Museum in Athens. And, you know, 30 years ago, you didn't talk about the Battle of Athens because the community was so divided. So one thing to remember is this was a political system. So even if some of the folks were local and veterans and siding with the sheriff, a lot of times that's because there are all these embedded connections. You know, a lot of people didn't have choices because of their, you know, it divided the community. So you know, these vets that came back, I think, found a way and a common voice, but obviously they were not under the sway of the sheriff already.
Right.
So I think for folks outside of Athens, this is a local story that up until probably about 8 years ago, that the museum really didn't even put an exhibit in about the Battle of Athens until probably about 8 or 9 years ago. And they did Sheriff Joe Guy, who is in McMinn County, does a lot of great local history, and he's written books, and he did a documentary, and a local documentary, and he's the McMinn County Sheriff, or he might not be at this moment, but local historian. He's probably about my age, and he did oral interviews with folks. So folks might want to check out the McMinn County Living Heritage Museum, or just go online and see what you can find out. But this was really a divisive sort of thing. So she's exactly right. I'm sure that there were local folks that were veterans, but remember that this it's this good old boy system that, on steroids, this political system that was really tested. So, and there's also a Battle of Benton, which is in Polk County, just southeast of there. So it wasn't just in Athens. They had similar tests to to this way that it's always been. And in West Tennessee, it's later, but you have Buford-Pusser, that's the exact opposite. So it's an interesting story, but it's something that for that community, it ended up being a national story and covered by the national press, and got attention back to East Tennessee in ways that maybe people didn't understand the local impact of it. And the other thing is, it'd be interesting to know where race played a role in it, if at all. Where the Black community in McMinn County, how did this conflict impact that community as well?
Those are some great insights. Yes, absolutely. I'd like to learn more about this.
So, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask another question. In thinking about this, when the young guys and everyone went off to war, was this sheriff that politically strong, or did he started evolving in the vacuum of when the able-bodied men pulled out? I don't know his age or anything, but was there a vacuum in power, and all you had left were the elderly, the children, and the women? Did that help his rise to power? And I understand exactly what Lisa was saying, that you come back from the war as a veteran, but you find out that he's been good to your family, so you have to pull back, even though it probably was a very difficult situation. But that was another thought that I had too. So
yeah, and I think it is likely. That nothing that I read in the research, there was nothing about that I saw. So I don't know, but I think it's very possible.
Nancy, if he had connections to the Crump machine, because of course, Boss Crump had, while his center of power was Memphis, he was impacting politics all across the state. And so if this sheriff had connections to the Crump political machine, then it's likely that, there were enough tie-ins there that helped to grow his local power base. Because, what Crump would do is basically he'd, give people jobs, and, there were all kinds of favors that were done to keep people in his, circle of influence.
Yeah. I'm super excited to hear about the oral history that Lisa was talking about.
Yeah, I'll need to check with Joe and see if I can find, I'll share with Kira, if I can find a link to that oral history. I think it's a fascinating story. And, another thing to realize is, again, this is something that has a lot of primary source evidence out there. It was covered nationally in the press. It would make an interesting kind of thing to see what questions the students have and what they might be able to ferret out of the story. When sometimes we don't have times as teachers, sometimes, there might be a student that wants to take it on. I know that in Polk County for a number of years and in McMinn County, when they competed in National History Day, the students would often do the Battle of Benton and the Battle of Athens. So if anybody could tell the story back at that time when adults were not wanting to talk about it, they allowed the students to research it. So it would be interesting too to see how much of that might be available. So I'll see what I can find too and share with Kira, and she can, and with Nancy, but also they can share with others and with folks on here if we find some things.
And I've got a few things I'm going to mention here in just a moment too. So. All right, so do we want to kind of jump into our Battle of Athens activity? Maybe that'll help to kind of take our story the next step and looking at some of these resources and kind of what the ramifications of this event were. So let me pull up the right PowerPoint here. All right, so the Battle of Athens is an event that we have covered in the 4th unit in the curriculum. And this unit looks at kind of the social, the changes in the war, in wartime and post-war Tennessee. So the social, the economic, the political. And so we looked at a lot of, different events and kind of, again, the ramifications of what happened as people returned. And of course, the Battle of Athens is one of those, and one we wanted to add in because it's an event that is really interesting, but it's not really, again, there's not been a lot out there about it in our textbooks. There's not a ton that most people know about it. And so we really wanted to see what we could do to provide some resources for this. So we do have an activity that you can find in the curriculum, and it starts on page 128. So if you want to look at that in that 4th unit. And again, we start with using that image that Nancy showed us a minute ago. So, having your students look at this image and try to figure out, what's going on, what is happening here in this picture. And so again, working with them to give them some, have them do an analysis of this, maybe make some predictions, and then giving them a chance to dig into the event itself. And again, because when we don't know a lot about, we do include a list of 4 different resources that are available that you could use to kind of build some background knowledge about this. So there are a number of newspapers that recorded, information about the event that you can find in the Library of Congress's Chronicle of America website, such as the Evening Star or from the DC paper or the Waterbury Democrat in Connecticut. Both of them have some articles. As Lisa mentioned a minute ago, this has been a popular topic for some History Day projects in the past. And there is one project that was shared with us from the state coordinator for Tennessee History Day. That's a really good example that we've linked here. That's a YouTube video. That way you can actually go and watch that. And again, this is a student's project. You can kind of talking about the battle. So that's a good way that you can kind of introduce the topic to your students. Then there are other interviews that are available from Bill White, who is an Athens native, that you can find with the Center for the Study of War and Society at UT Knoxville. And so we've got linked there the oral history and the transcript for that. And you'll note that there is a little disclaimer there at the bottom that you might want to again look through that and preface that before you give that to students, because there is maybe some inappropriate language for younger students. And then there's a book there that's referenced that Colby, our contractor who worked on this, was able to find, that you might be able to hunt down again to get kind of more background information about this. And all of this information again is there in the curriculum, so you can get to the links here and find some of those resources. So after the fact, of course, we know that eventually the veterans who were pushing for change are successful. But again, this information about what happens gets shared. And one of the things that we found that I find fascinating is that there was an op-ed that Eleanor Roosevelt wrote about this event that was published in the Knoxville News Sentinel in shortly after it happened on August 6, 1946. And so you can actually find the transcript of this article in our curriculum. It's on page 130. So the article itself is available through newspapers.com, but it's one that you need a subscription to access. So unless you already have that, you won't be able to get to it yourself. But we do have, again, that transcription that is available in the curriculum. So if you want to open that up and take a moment to read through that, we're going to look at this and kind of think about what Eleanor Roosevelt has to say about the Battle of Athens. And again, this bigger the bigger picture of why this is significant. So again, if you want to pull that up and find that, I will drop the link for that in the comments, just in case you haven't found that yet. So give me just a second. Wait. Already again, and that's the one I just put the link there in the comments. That's available on page 130 is what we're looking at. So as you read through that, I want you to think about, again, what really stands out to you in what she is saying here. All right, so Suzanne mentions that we shouldn't have to resort to violence to make political change. Yeah, crooked politicians, people will rise up and take back their rights. Yeah, it's definitely not a condemnation of the veterans. And if anything, I think, again, this whole a warning piece is like, again, we have this population of men primarily who are returning from war, who again have been in positions where they've had to resort to armed conflict, and so they're already kind of conditioned to that. Like, we need to make sure that we are now transitioning back to the way things should be here, which is that we honor the voices of the people. We do that through the vote. And if not, again, we have this population that, you know, is already accustomed to taking things into their own hands. Like, we don't want that to become the norm. Anything else that really kind of stands out to you? Yeah, it also doesn't outright condemn the political machines. You know, that they are part of the system, which, you know, it is, you know, I think maybe for high school students, you get into this about the role of, you know, political machines, you know, especially during this time period. I mean, they still have a role today, maybe not quite as prominently, or we don't talk about them as prominently as we did during, you know, earlier in the 20th century, but, you know, they had a role, so it's not quite a condemnation of them. But at the same time, it was a warning that those running those political machines need to be, you know, responsive to the people and to the voters, because if they weren't, if they tried essentially to be dictators, that, you know, people would rise up against them. What does it say about this event that we have Eleanor Roosevelt talking about it? Yeah, it's a big deal. It definitely caught national attention. And I think, you know, that's where you know, one of these questions, you know, students often, you know, ask us, you know, why is it important? Like, you know, why does it matter? And I think that, you know, again, the story that, you know, sometimes, you know, oftentimes isn't in our textbooks, but when we think about why does it matter? Well, again, if it was big enough that it caught the attention of Eleanor Roosevelt, that within days of it happening, she is writing an op-ed to be printed, speaks to its significance. And again, just how important it was for, you know, the country to, as it started to settle back into peacetime, to reconnect with, again, the values of the time, again, the value of the vote, and the value of democracy, and how, you know, how we think as Americans our system and our government should run, which is being responsive to the people. And I think the other thing here, you're thinking about those big, like, so what questions, is, you know, how can we help students, you know, how might students draw connections to this event? And we've already talked about that a little bit, thinking about, you know, how they might draw connections to, you know, the January 6th event, how they might draw connections to, you know, other, you know, discussions about, you know, political strife and conflict and violence, and, you know, talk of voter intimidations, and any of those things that we see that are kind of, you know, unfortunately part of our discourse today. You know, there are connections that students might draw, and again, to see how, you know, we've lived through these events before, and what does that look like. So hopefully, you know, this can be a new activity, something new that you can layer in and really kind of maybe engage your students in conversation. In addition to the Battle of Athens, in this unit, you'll find information and activities around, of course, Cordell Hull and the formation of the United Nations, because, of course, we couldn't leave that out with Cordell Hull having Tennessee roots. We also have some lesson activities on some of the racial issues that were happening in the post-war era. So there's one, of course, on the Columbia race riots. There's another one. We found some really fascinating interviews that were done as part of these man on the street interviews that are available through the Library of Congress, and there's some that are from Nashville. So again, talking about some of the, you know, the racial issues in Nashville. So that is one of the activities. And then we have another one that gets into the WWII campaign, of course, that Nancy mentioned earlier. And there is an op-ed that was printed in the Tennessean that connects the WWII campaign to Franklin Roosevelt's Four Freedoms speech. And so that is a really fun activity because of how you can draw this connection to, you know, something else that you probably already talk about in your classrooms. We are hoping to add a couple more videos and things to our supplement list to get into some other things, especially like the role of veterans in, some of the changes that happened in the post-war period, for example, like Tent City in West Tennessee. So hoping to add some things there. Questions about anything that we have in this post-war unit or the Battle of Athens? All right. Well, if there's no questions, I'm going to turn it back over to Nancy, who's going to kind of round out our time together tonight, talking a little bit about the POW camps in Tennessee.
And I tell you what, I just wanted to make an observation as Nancy's getting ready to share her screen and all. I was just scrolling through to try to see if I could easily on YouTube or something find the documentary I was talking about. One of the things we begun to recognize with some of these events in East Tennessee history, they're now being kind of pulled forward in today's world, and people are beginning to use a lot of these events or documentaries about them or films about them to kind of give weight to current day activity and current day stressors and actions that people are interested in taking. So it's really interesting if you go through and just scroll through the YouTube and see how many different people, or just look online at the different types of websites that now are posting about the Battle of Athens. It's just interesting, and it's so important for us to realize, the historical story and to really understand its importance, and for our students to understand the importance of these historical events so that they can be wise and critical of the things that they may see out in the social media and websites when they're looking at things that they're studying in school. That's becoming really, especially with things from this time period. And even the state of Franklin, there's a video about the state of Franklin. The company can't even sell it anymore because of the way it was being used. So it's interesting, the time we're living in.
Yeah, that was very well said. Very well said indeed, Lisa. Okay, so I know we're running a little short on time. Just before I get into the next couple of slides, I just wanted to thank Lisa and Kira and all of you. This has been a wonderful way to connect with people I don't normally see and interact with, and thanks for inviting me. All right, I'm very formulaic, I guess. I always ask if I'm introducing a new topic, hey, what do y'all know about X? So without revealing my slide, what do you all know about the prisoner of war camps in Tennessee in World War II? Anything?
I know about Camp Crossville.
Which camp, I'm sorry?
Crossville.
Crossville, okay, that's the one that I have focused on because my parents live in Crossville. Anybody else?
Someone else mentions Camp Forest, which is now an Air Force base in Tullahoma.
Tullahoma, yep.
And I got
Interesting. Oh,
one of my history degrees and my teaching licensure up at Austin P. And Dr. Antonio Thompson is there, and he's a distinguished author of Tennessee POW camps. He just came out with another book, and Dr. Thompson up there in the history department. So I have that personal connection with he being one of my professors, and I have some of his books, and taking a class on the POW events and their lives and their letters and their experiences and how they blended, they stayed, so many of them stayed, and a fascinating subject. I was just happened to be at the right university for tying into the subject tonight.
I didn't know that book was out. I'll have to get a copy of
Yeah,
that.
he's written a few. I think 2015 was his first, and I think he just came out with one or two more this year. So it's his passion.
Excellent. Okay, well, there are 11 total POW camps in the state of Tennessee, and Tullahoma, Camp Campbell, Camp Tyson and Camp Crossville are the largest. What do you see in the picture? See, again, I'm so formulaic.
Well, there's a guard tower.
Okay,
Fencing,
yes, I think the
fencing.
first thing I saw was the guard tower. Thank you. And
There's a swastika. Oh yeah, there it is
yeah,
in there. Yeah, I didn't see that at first. It's tiny on my screen. Barbed wire.
mm-hmm. And then there's people.
Yeah,
Flat
all the
topography,
Yep,
There's
it's
give-
flat.
The Nazis.
flat topography, no hills.
Mhm. They're giving the Nazi salute.
I have no idea what's going on in this picture. I have no explanations, but yes, I thought it was a good starter image. I really want to know more about the POW camps in Tennessee. And I've just started to sort of peel the layers of all the great stuff that is in the Tennesseans thing that Kira and you all have worked on. It also employed men and women, but I think there's really some interesting kind of, I don't understand why the rules were this way. As I said, I wanted to focus on Camp Crossville. It was nicknamed, and I know that this is a slur, so pardon me, but it was nicknamed by the locals the Jap camp. There were absolutely no Japanese soldiers interned in that camp. Most of the prisoners in Camp Crossville were from Rommel's Africa Corps, and there were also some Italians that were in the Tennessee POW camps. But yeah, no Japanese, at least in the camps from in Tennessee, excuse me. An interesting, somebody had said, I know something about Camp Forest. And I read an interesting little ditty about Camp Forest, and it goes to my next bullet point here about the rules were super lax. Like there were not a lot of rules enforced because many, especially of the Italian POWs, would work for locals in the area, doing, you know, whatever the locals wanted them to help with. And it was totally okay for people who were living in Camp Crossville, and I'm assuming throughout the state. It was okay to sort of just go take a walk around the neighborhood and then just make sure that you're back in a reasonable time. But there's a story from Camp Forest that says, and this just made me giggle a little bit, that this POW just kind of left the camp and caught the 925 train to Nashville, and did, you know, it was, he basically was a pub crawler. He went to various bars in Nashville. He hooked up with an American GI who was on leave, and they you know, did the town. And it wasn't until like the next day, when he was some, you know, a police officer or somebody asked like, hey, who are you, what are you doing? He's like, oh, well, I'm a POW. So that, I think that floored me. But I think that kind of encapsulates maybe the idea that these camps were, I would say that they're, well, I don't want to make decisions like that, but the rules were lax, and the United States followed the Geneva Convention, right? In all of the camps in Tennessee, they were they could take English lessons, they could take mathematical lessons, they could take physics, and some of the other classes that I never want to take again. And also in in Camp Crossville, this particular,
They could work for money.
it was they gave, you could go get beer, you could walk out of the camp, go into Crossville and somewhere get beer, and they could also take piano lessons. So honestly, and you know, I don't claim to be a know-it-all of anything, especially history, but I didn't expect that. That was like a moment I was like, wow, that's something I didn't think was going to be there. The picture, this picture has no context, so I'm not even going to ask you what you see here. But that is the only standing, one of the only standing original buildings at Camp Crossville. And now it's not called Camp Crossville, it's called the Clyde York 4-H Center. So the area is, at least the building, this was the infirmary. The infirmary building is still on the same property. And I think that that's probably it. Somebody else mentioned the bell tower is still there as well. There are a lot of interesting stories. Again, most of the things that fascinated me, and I'm trying to speed it up here, Nancy, but the 4-H Center claims that there's a ghost named Herman the German. I really hope that that's true. I'm not sure that I actually believe in ghosts, but the name Herman the German is just a great name for a ghost. And I'm sure that all the 4-H kids that come, you know, and stay overnight during the summer around the campfire, can you imagine the stories about Herman the German? But I guess to go back to a more academic sense, you know, the POW system in the United States, I think we could make, we could sort of compare and contrast, you know, how do these internment camps, how do they rank in terms of, you know, better or worse than the Japanese internment camps were in the western portion of the United States. You know, there's a lot of interesting facets, and I am excited to see what Kira has for us for the last portion.
So we don't have time to get into, of course, any activities, but the one of the other 4 units that we have is called Tennesseans at War. And so in that particular unit, there is some information, some resources that you can look at to really kind of get into the story of the POW camps, but largely just about the you know, the different military installations that were in the state. So there's information in that unit on the Tennessee maneuvers. There's information on the barrage balloons, which I knew nothing about before we got into this, and it is fascinating because Tennessee was the only place to train for the barrage balloons. So again, interesting piece to bring in. So definitely take a look at that unit for, again, more information on all, again, that military side of the story about what was happening in Tennessee during the period. We are, again, getting ready to kind of round out because we have kept you guys long enough. So let me bring up a couple things as we close. All right. So 2 things. Lisa and I are part of the larger Discover Tennessee History consortium, and we are currently trying to collect information from educators around the state about what you're looking for in the way of professional development, educational resources, really how we can be a better resource to you, because we understand that a lot of things have changed over the last few years, and we really want to kind of again hear from you guys about where we're at today. So we have a survey here that you can access using the QR code. So if you guys would take a few minutes, open that up, fill that out for us, we would really, really appreciate it. And we can drop the link in the chat as well, if that would be helpful for you to open up and do that in later. It is, it's not a super long survey, but it's one that'll take you a couple minutes to do. But again, we would really, really appreciate your feedback on that. And then lastly, if you are interested in getting PD credit for this session, you will need to complete a different survey, but this is the one that we will use to generate your PD certificate. So again, you can use the QR code here to open that up, or I will drop the link in the chat here in just a few moments. But this will be what you will use in order to get PD credit. So you must fill this out in order to get a certificate. That certificate will be emailed to you. I believe Lisa is going to be sending those out for those of you who are attending live. And then for those of you who might be watching this recording later on, again, you can complete that certificate, and I will be checking the form link and sending those out on about a weekly basis. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to one of us, and we will make sure that you get your certificate if you've not received it within about a week of filling it out, if you're doing this later on. If you have any questions, feel free to let us know. And again, as Lisa mentioned, this is the first in a series of events that we'll be doing around World War II in Tennessee. The next one is actually going to focus more on that early period, thinking about the New Deal and kind of the lead up to the war period that will happen on the last Saturday in April in Crossville. You can get in touch with either Lisa or I about information about that workshop if you would like to join, and we will be happy to see you there. So unless Lisa, you or Nancy have anything else, we can kind of close out. And for those of you who are with us live, if you have some questions, you want to hang around after we stop the recording, we'll be happy to answer those questions. All right, so thank you guys so much for joining us, and we hope to see you at our next event.